Alright, hello guys, welcome back to another video. So I wanted to come on here to talk about the Nickelodeon Dan Schneider stuff. And I know I'm a little bit late, but I've been working on some other things on the second channel because I've been trying to get that channel to 100,000 subscribers. If you're interested in what the second channel has to offer, I will be putting a link in the pinned comment down below. And yeah, yesterday I uploaded a video on Neon's shitty apology. This comes after he said some choice things to a 12-year-old on stream and got banned for it. So yeah, that's what that's about. If you're interested, link in the pinned comment. Now for today, I figured I would talk about this despite me being a little bit late on the situation because a lot of people have wanted me to cover it. Recently, allegations have came out against Nickelodeon and one of its top producers, or I should say former top producers, Dan Schneider. And I'll be totally honest with you guys right here. When I was watching the Nickelodeon programs, I was not caring or thinking about who the producers were or the people who were behind the scenes that did the work for the show. I only knew about the people who were actually in the TV shows. And this is more expected when you're a child too. You're not really thinking about like producers and like script writers and stuff like that because they're all behind the scenes. So I didn't necessarily know who Dan Schneider was because of that, but I am learning a lot of bad things about him. You know, sure, he made these really good and entertaining shows that did really good for Nickelodeon and a lot of people enjoyed them, but from the things I am hearing, he really is not the best person. And some of the things that happen behind the scenes with kid actors is some of the most vile shit you're gonna hear in a very long time. It doesn't really surprise me that stuff like this would be happening unsupervised by people's parents. No, it really doesn't, because you're having random kid actors, children, right, work with adults, random adults. Like, these are strangers. Sure, they work for Nickelodeon and whatnot, and they're known for doing that, but they're strangers. And it really doesn't surprise me that most of the producers and the people behind the scenes, for whatever fucking reason, are alleged to be pedophiles and like child abusers. Like, it really doesn't surprise me. And when it comes down to everything that was going on behind the scenes and on the set, Dan Schneider was the guy who was in charge and he was just letting it happen. Now, maybe some things he wasn't aware of, but most things it seems like he was aware of, and that includes, for whatever reason, filming this type of scene multiple times for multiple episodes.
And sometimes there were scenes where there was a prop that was like,
what's he doing?
That could be a sexual innuendo.
Those are good ones.
Dan went overboard and just zoomed in too often on the feet.
Wow, they're really soft.
Zoomed in too often on the tongue licking things. Or something that just went too far.
Like, is anybody else just incredibly disturbed right now? Like, this is insane. It's literally so fucking insane. And by the way, this is for a kid's audience. Most of us kids, when we were watching this, we thought nothing of this. So who is this really for? Because yeah, I mean, I'm guessing most kids watching this at the time probably had not hit puberty yet. It's kind of really fucking weird. Really fucking weird. And you know what's even more crazy is these kids who were acting on the shows, they probably had no idea that what was going on here was fucking wrong.
Was anyone able to say anything, or was that like...
Oh, no. No, it's Dan's baby.
Dan was Nickelodeon's golden boy. And even if he and the network were at odds, he had the power to push back. It was very hard to say anything to him. And his show, Victorious, took this to a whole new level. With that show, there were online extras that the network did not fully know how to deal with. Time for your nap, tomatoes. In some of them, you see Ariana putting tomatoes in a bra.
And that's where we're gonna stop it, okay? I mean, I don't feel like I have to show all of that here on this YouTube video because it's just so fucking weird. But yeah, no, from what you heard from that part right there, and people not being able to tell him that, oh, they didn't want to do this, or, you know, he shouldn't do this stuff, people couldn't do that because he was in full control. So yeah, that is really fucked up. And all the stuff that went down, at least on the set and maybe off the set, he was behind it. But anyways, like, this shit is actually fucking disgusting. It's actually insane that this was going down. And what's crazy about it too is I'm 20. I was born in the early 2000s, and these were the shows that we were growing up with and that we were watching. And when we were children, we probably wouldn't have recognized how fucking weird this is or even questioned it at the ages that we were at. And I just find it so weird that there are so many instances of him in shows that he happens to be behind, like the top producer for each show. I just find it so weird that like there are so many instances of like shows asking children for feet pics, there being feet showcased, like how I showed you earlier, like where they literally do scenes just featuring the feet for whatever fucking reason. And I mean, this is just fucked. And this is not the only thing that happened behind the scenes or during when the show was active, because recently, if you guys have not heard and you're not really in the loop, a whole dedicated docu-series has came out, and it's going to be a whole series that details some of the really fucking bad things that have happened to children, specifically the kid actors, at the hands of Dan Schneider and these other writers and producers. This docu-series is called Quiet on Set. Now, the reason reason why this is really big right now is because recently an episode came out, because before this episode, 3 episodes have already came out, and with this 4th episode, a former child star, who happens to be Drake Bell from the show Drake and Josh, had came out with his story about how he was sexually abused by his acting coach. Now, before we get into this, I just wanted to say there are going to be, I guess, some spoilers to the 4th episode, and I highly recommend you guys watch this whole series because they did do some really good work with this series. And it's good that we finally get to hear the voices that have been silenced coming out and telling the world what had happened to them so that they can get their stories out, and the people who did the really bad acts to them will not get away with what they did. In October 2004, Brian Peck is sentenced in Van Nuys, California for child sex abuse. Now, I don't think I said the city right, but that's beyond the point. Now, for the people who are slow, Brian Peck is the acting coach that we just talked about like maybe a minute ago, so just keep that in mind as we go forward. Drake Bell was a minor at the time of abuse and therefore was known as John Doe. The majority of the court record was sealed. Okay, so yeah, that really is interesting when it comes down to this because, I mean, if you guys did not know, whenever a minor is like a victim in a crime or like commits a crime that isn't too bad, like say if they rob a store or something, the government usually does not like show the identities of these children because they're not really allowed to. That's why nobody exactly knew who was actually the victim until now, nearly 20 years later, when this whole story has been revealed on this series. And yeah, they said his identity has remained private until now. And it's just like, man, I could only imagine something really bad happening when you're a child back in 2004, right? Like you being sexually abused, and then nobody really even knows what happened to you until you come out 20 years later with your story. And then it's also like the stuff that happened, like he's gonna have to live with this for the rest of his life.
On the day of sentencing for Brian, I get to the courthouse. It was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. His entire side of the courtroom was full. There were definitely some recognizable faces on that side of the room. And my side was me, my mom, and my brother.
All right, just for copyright, because I can't really show like a whole lot of this, I just decided that I was going to cut it right here. And now let's get back to it.
Brian had been convicted, but getting all of this support from a lot of people in the industry, and yeah, I was pretty shocked.
Now, once again, like I said in the beginning of the video, I had to manipulate some of these clips a little bit and make the audio sound a little bit weird. And I also flipped them horizontally to see if I could sort of bypass content ID. What I am doing with the clips is totally legal, even if I decide to manipulate them or not. I'm just trying to dodge the content ID because realistically, putting a few segments in of somebody else's work and adding your own commentary over it is covered under fair use. So I just figured I would clarify that. And also, when it comes down to them all defending this Brian Peck guy and nobody was over there supporting Drake Bell, like that's insanely fucked up. It really is. And I'm not exactly sure what these guys were told, but whatever they were told, like for some reason these guys were defending him and they were saying some things like this. I assure you what Brian has been through in the last year is the suffering of 100 men. Like what? I'm not sure if this guy knew what was going on here or what dude was being accused of and eventually convicted of, but I don't care how close you are to somebody in terms of being friends or say like family. But like, no, there's no way you're going to be seeing me defend somebody who does something as vile as what this guy did. And I definitely would have never in any case written anything like this. I have seen the effects the situation has had on Brian, and I know for a fact that he regrets any mistakes he made. Like, again, what the fuck? How is this a mistake? Like, I'm just so surprised that nobody really cares about the victim in this situation. This young kid, like, they're really going up to bat this hard for this guy who ended up doing these things. Like, that's so fucked because he was never inappropriate in any way. Now, okay, they might be talking about like their own experiences with him, but I mean, a lot of people have really dark sides to them. Like, you don't know what somebody is doing behind the scenes. So to write something like this to the judge, because that's what these are for, these are letters to the judge, with many of these letters asking if he can just have probation instead of the 16 months that he got for being convicted of what he was convicted of, which I mean, that in and of itself is just, I don't even know how that's even like, why that's even possible, why you're allowed to get that amount amount of time for doing something so just vile. But that's a whole nother issue. But at the same time, just the fact that so many people were defending Breone Peck and not Drake Bell is just insane to me. Now, anyways, I wanted to also detail that after this conviction happened and after he did his time, for whatever reason, Disney hired him to work for them on the show Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. Now, if you know anything about that show, minors were also actors for that show and like the main stars, you know. So having a convicted sex offender hired and working on that show that has children starring in it, it's just fucking insane and shouldn't have happened. Like, how does this happen? Like, this sort of just shows you like the disgusting and vile things that are happening behind the scenes in the kid acting sphere. Now, besides what has came out about Drake Bell, the main majority of this episode did focus on Dan Schneider and the things that we went over in the beginning of this video regarding him. And I'm not really sure if I said this or not, but there has been a lot of backlash that he has received for this. And because of that, he decided to go on an interview to do a quote unquote apology. And I just wanted to go over a little bit of that so you guys can see Dan Schneider's response. Now, just for a little bit of context, iCarly's Tebow decided to interview Dan Schneider, and here's a little bit of that interview.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played Tebow on Nickelodeon's iCarly. I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
I'm really glad you're here because I believe this is important.
For sure.
We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss, is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
Okay, so I guess he acknowledges that he did do some bad things in his past, things that he regrets, and he says that he owes a lot of people an apology, but that's not apologizing.
You've written hundreds of episodes. Thousands of jokes have been told.
Yeah.
But currently where we are, some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
All these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it. Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
The last thing I want to ever do
Yeah.
is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV. Why would I ever want to do that?
I mean, it's hard to be charitable here, even if I really wanted to be, because there's just so many references and sexualizing children that have happened over the years with these shows that I don't really know if I believe that, let alone that they were asking for feet pics for one of the shows at one point. Like, I don't really know if I buy this or not. And you can easily come out today and be like, if people really didn't like that and they're starting to realize that these were like us potentially sexualizing children, like, I want people to be happy and I want people to enjoy our shows. So yeah, of course I would cut it out of the show today. Of course I would, to save my own reputation. I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised. So that's why I really don't buy this. Because like I said before, it's just like there's too many like instances in which like the children are being sexualized. Like, it's disturbing, dude. And the fact that you didn't even think about that, oh, this could make us look really bad when you were making it, also says a lot about what you were doing.
Makes sense. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of elaborate on something.
Okay.
The thought process from the series is you had the power to just write a joke and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
The notion that I had the power to just produce whatever I wanted and have it air is completely false.
Okay.
There were many, many levels of scrutiny. Okay? We had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So two coasts.
Two coasts
Okay.
of
Both
approval,
coasts.
yes. And by the way, approval at every stage, really.
Okay.
And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
Now, when you say approval of these, obviously that's a hierarchy, not your colleagues or
right.
people in the room. Okay.
No, not my colleagues. No, these are my bosses. Bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses. And they're approving all of this stuff.
Okay.
Okay? And we're also shooting it in front of all sorts of adults and caregivers and the set teacher and the families. Everybody's watching it. And if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that, that's not appropriate, then it would have been cut out.
But that really doesn't make much sense. I mean, maybe you have higher ups above you, but you're the executive producer, meaning you're like the top guy who's working on that show. You're the boss. You're the CEO of that project. That's what that means, essentially. So that means that the writers are not above you unless Nickelodeon does something different compared to what other studios do. But I mean, regardless, you're going to be blamed for this stuff also because you're literally the boss and you had the ability to stop these things from being approved, right? Am I right? Or am I just wrong?
The darkest part of this series discuss child predators. Now, I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things up.
Okay?
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night. And next, I heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck. A lot of them pretty famous. Of course, Drake was devastated that that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was and asking for leniency. And they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree. And they still did this. That's baffling that adults would do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course. And I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career.
Yeah, no, do I think either of these situations really have anything to do with each other except for the fact that it was something really bad that happened in the industry? No, I really don't think that he had anything to do with it besides what he just said, how he helped with the speech. But the other things with sexualizing the children, I think he definitely had something to do with that, especially because of the main fact that like he was the executive producer, so he's seeing everything that's going on and everything that's going out. So yeah, when it comes down to Drake Bell, I don't really think Dan Schneider had really anything to do with that. So saying that Dan Schneider is behind that, I wouldn't necessarily say that's true, and I wouldn't be saying that. Now, those are just some of the main areas I want to focus on when it comes down to this interview and this situation. If you want to hear about everything in full, I definitely do recommend you go check out Quiet on Set, and I also recommend you to go check out this interview because both of those go deeper into what I just talked about, and I really do think you guys should watch those. Now, I guess with that being said, I think I'm going to be wrapping up the video right there. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys happen to enjoy this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so the video will get promoted more in the algorithm so more people will see it. Thank you guys so much for being a member to the channel. Your support really means the world to me, and I really do appreciate it. Now, once again, don't forget about the second channel. There is a link to that in the pinned comment down below, so go check that out. And with that said, my name is Breone, and I will see you in my next video. Peace!